For those of you who do have an APO, automatic pump out, we do have the discharge, the recovery tank discharge, which is a regular garden hose. Turn that on. There's no quick connect because we need to have the full flow of the hose at this point. And you will run that to an approved depository, whether it's down a toilet, you can snake the hose down a toilet, whether it's a mop sink, some sort of area where it can go into the actual sewer system. Now when I say sewage system, what I mean is a sewage treatment system, not into a storm drain that's going to run out and run into a lake or a river or the ocean. So make sure that that's in an area that is going to be treated. The next toggle on our control panel here is the pump clutch. Now this is going to engage the pump housing clutch that I showed you in the front of the van to the drive shaft, which is going to start what we call here at HydroMaster the power pack. And we have a power pack and slide-ins that have their own engines. In this case we're piggybacking off of the Chevy engine here. So once we turn this guy here on, we're going to have that pump clutch engage, which is going to begin the drive shaft turning, which is going to start the blower turning. The blower is the vacuum system in our power pack. It also is going to provide power to our pump and everything else that we need here that's not electrical, that needs to be driven by belt. So that's going to take care of that. We're in the on position. If we have the freshwater tank, we have fresh water flowing. Otherwise it's flowing automatically through this. Once the tap is opened up on your supply, make sure you do that. The machine won't start if there's a low water reading in it, so we'll know that right away because it won't start. But make sure that that valve is turned on. The other thing you want to make sure about is here is the discharge. If we do not have an automatic pump out, this is the tank clean out valve right here. So when you go to drain your tank, you're going to hook your hose up to this. It's going to be a regular vac hose, and you're going to drain it in again, a proper sewage treatment system. Make sure, and this happens sometimes, so I just want to make sure you close that valve off when you're done, because if you don't, the vacuum, you're not going to see any vacuum at your hose when you go to vacuum the carpet. It's letting air in here and it's not transferring our suction up to these outlets here, and this is where our hose will attach. In fact, I'm going to attach that right now. We're ready to have our vacuum hooked up. We're going to go ahead and hook that up so it's ready to go. The end of this hose is attached to your wand or whatever tool you're using in the home. Now that we have our vacuum hose connected here to the waste tank and we have our solution hose connected, ready for a supply from the machine, they both run into your home, hooked to the whatever tool you're using, whether it's a wand or a rotary, and it's ready to go from that standpoint. The next thing I'd like to discuss is the solution flow system. What we're going to do here, we have two knobs and we have a meter measurement here. We're going to turn this knob to the bottom prime setting. What that does is it allows any air that has entered the system overnight when it's not being in use to be pushed out and back into the freshwater tank. It purges the air from the system. So this ball, there's a little ball inside this meter is going to bounce pretty much. It's going to bounce to the top a few times and it's going to rattle around here at the top. And once it stays steady at the top, we know that our system is primed. So now that we have our system primed and ready to use, we're going to turn it to the on position. And we're going to use this knob right here is going to be the adjuster, and it'll tell us how many gallons per hour that our chemical pump is adding to the freshwater supply. We use at HydroMaster what we call the last step chemical pump. It is attached to the pump itself. The injection of any chemical that's being used is done after it's gone through our system and heated, so that there's no chemical that's being added into our system to degrade any of the fittings inside, depending on if you're using an acid or an alkaline type of cleaner. What we're trying to do is to minimize how much exposure is inside the equipment to make it last for, it's a big investment, make it last. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this knob here, which we had set at 0 to start with, and we're going to adjust it. Now basically what this is going to do is it's going to move this ball to a point along this shaft inside here. Now the recommended level average is going to be 2, 3, 4, somewhere in that range. But I always want you to go back to the label on the jug that you're using and use the recommended level that the manufacturer intended you to use. And again, this is per hour. So there's not a lot of chemicals going in, but it's going to do the job for you. So when we've heated our water, we're going to activate that chemical even more. So it's going to do the job for you. Go with the recommendations on the jug. We're going to move down to our pressure gauge right here. We've got our gauge and we've got our knob to adjust the pressure. Our fluid is flowing, so we know that we've got it in the system. We're going to adjust this. We want to move it to about 300 to 400 psi for carpet. That's going to be right in there. You may adjust it accordingly depending on your needs, especially if it's a hard surface type of situation where you're going to require it to go up quite high. But we're going to adjust this knob to about 300 to 400. At which point we need to go to the tool. If the tool's next to the van and you've got it handy, we want to pull that trigger and hold it open for a few seconds. That's going to adjust it's going to get the gauge to settle down to what you actually have at the tip and what this gauge is reading. So once we do that, we've got our chemical flow. Everything is operating at this point. While we're still here at the front of the panel, I'd like to describe what these two yellow handles are. Starting with the one on the left-hand side, this valve, when pulled forward, will drain through a hose any balance of fresh water that is in freshwater holding tank here, the gray tank that's attached to the back of the waste tank, not to be confused with anything that you may have for supplying your water as a freshwater holding tank. When we're using our garden hose and we're bringing it in from a building or from a home, it's supplying that tank with our fresh water. Sometimes we need to drain that. If you're going to descale the machine, we'll talk about that during the maintenance side of this, or if you're going to run antifreeze in it to freeze guard it for the winter. So that comes in handy when that needs to be done. Normally it's kept in the closed position and you leave it there until you do need to drain it. The second item here on the right, this is the control for heat. So we have a gauge on the top panel in the front here, which is a heat gauge. It is going to be controlled by this lever. Now what we have is, as I explained in the very beginning when we were at the front of the truck, we have tapped into the coolant system of the van itself, and we have lines running back into a heat exchanger on the back side, again on the back side of our waste tank. It's running the coolant temperature. Now when you're running your van in a normal operation, and I'm not talking about super hot, but if you're running normally, it's going to be at around 200 degrees. That 200 degree coolant is running through hoses, and it's running through a series of pipes inside of tubes inside on the side here of the waste tank. There are going to be times, normally it's left in the up position to get your maximum heat. There are going to be times when you're doing upholstery work where you don't want that heat. You're going to be able to adjust this down. You can turn it off and it bypasses those heat exchangers completely, or you can bring it up part way. And again, there's a gauge on the front of the machine here, up above, that will dial in that temperature for you so you know what you're working at for safety of the fabrics and so on. So keep in mind that that is basically a bypass. If it's in the half position, it's a partial bypass. It's only going to allow a little bit of heat. This particular van also has a Salsa, what we call Salsa. It's the blower exhaust from our vacuum. When that's running, it creates heat. That heat exhaust is run through another heat exchanger, which is a series of tubes back and forth, and it captures that heat. To boost your operating temperatures, it adds about 30 to 45 degrees in temperature, depending on the environment, to the already preheated water coming through the coolant heat exchangers. To boost the operating temperature, you're going to be working at about 240 degrees thereabouts. It's going to, again, be environmentally dictated by what's going on. In the case of lowering the temperature here with the Salsa option, And again, that is an option. Normally it comes with an exhaust, and I'll show you that in a minute. An exhaust muffler, if you will. It's called the Hush Kit. You're still going to get that heat, but again, that's only going to be about 30 to 45 degrees, so that's not going to change really what's going on with fabrics, but it will take out the main heat source, which is the coolant. In a situation where we're doing water damage restoration, that's another situation where we would want to turn and bypass the heat mode. We don't need it at that point. All we're using is the vacuum. So this comes in handy to adjust. There's a sliding scale here on the side that you can see. As you come up, you're going to increase your temperatures, and as you go back down, you're going to lower your temperatures. So with that being said, I do want to show our Hush Kit, just so that you know what it looks like. I thought I'd show you an example of a Hush Kit that comes with standardly with the 4.8 CDS. This particular van is mounted with an extra heat exchanger, as I said before, but this may be what you're looking at behind the front seat, driver's seat. That's where both this and the heat exchanger, when it's optioned, will be located. So we often call this the torpedo. It's called a bunch of different names, but basically it's called the Hush Kit, and I just thought I'd show that because that may be what you're looking at back there, and it pretty well is trouble-free. We don't need to worry too much about what's going on.